part of what I'd like to get into is the state of contemporary religion and spirituality. And I'd like to get your take on that, because what seems to have happened in the last few years, when I was going through my late teens and into my 20s in the noughties, the new atheist movement was absolutely in the cultural, it was the cultural hegemon, as it were. And that was what was percolating through everyone's ideas and minds. And what I've noticed, and what more distinguished people in this spirituality space than I have noticed, like Justin Brierley of Premier Radio's Unbelievable, he's released a podcast, The Surprising Rebirth of the Belief in God, and within that he has people like Tom Holland, Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson. They're all making Christianity more respectable and taking seriously again. Ayaan Hirsi Ali's coming out saying, I'm Christian, having been once aligned to the new atheist movement. There's a civilizational aspect to it. And then you've got evangelizers like Bishop Barron and Paul Kingsnorth and Martin Shaw, who are out there actually bringing the Christian message in some way. So it feels like the world, despite being as secular as it's ever been, is actually in some way desecularizing, and Christianity is ending up back on the menu. But what's your take? Where do you think we are with contemporary religion and spirituality?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I think you're right to identify that we do seem to have moved beyond a disenchanted age. It was very easy to kind of throw that word around back when the new atheist movement was happening, back when even the kind of tech industry seemed quite sort of utilitarian and scientistic. But now it's not really the case, because as you say, on the one hand, we're seeing a revival of Christian ideas even among the new atheist crowd, and also even Silicon Valley, for example, seems more than ever motivated by some quite explicitly kind of spiritual, quite utopian, ideas sort of in the realm of Gnosticism and transhumanism, and which are, whether they're the right spiritual ideas, they are kind of in a sense a re-enchanting vision, aren't they? In a way, I think one way that perhaps all of these trends could be summed up, if I could try and kind of put a slightly grand narrative on everything, is that I think spirituality and religion in all of their forms have really just become very, very democratized and very kind of malleable and sort of customizable on a very, very small scale. So what I mean by that is I think there's this quite clear progression, which I think can really be compared to the media. I think is actually quite a good analogy. So it's like traditionally, but at one point you have like the BBC. So everybody is tuning into the BBC. It's this kind of national kind of institution that everybody knows, and everybody gets their information and their news from there. That's a bit like the church. So you have this kind of centralized institution. And then you have the growth of kind of different channels. You have like Channel 4 Music, Vivo, not that even exists anymore, but like a plurality of channels. So culture's kind of splitting off, and people are adjusting their culture to their own tastes. So in tandem with that, you have like kind of the new age movement. You have these kind of alternative forms of spirituality which become subculturally popular in the kind of 60s, 70s, 80s. And now, if you think about the state of media now, with the introduction of the personal smartphone, personal computer, even, you have this complete freedom to totally personalize and manipulate the algorithm of what it is you consume in such a way that it's perfectly aligned to your own tastes and your aesthetics and your personal dispositions. And similarly, I would say that spirituality and religion have also become, hyper personalized in that way. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think these things are quite co-constitutive. I mean, especially when you look at current forms of spirituality that are growing, small relatively, but growing among my generation, things like witch talk, various kind of syncretic, kind of like a bit often quite new agey, but at the same time not really like the new age, because they're very, very personalized, and people can choose any blend of like Wicca, shamanism, astrology. They can people are very syncretic. This is just one example, but I think what essentially I'm trying to say is that we've gone from having a nation of people mostly adhering to one faith to then a kind of plurality of faiths and now a kind of totally individualized form of faith. And I think that while what you're saying about the revival of Christianity potentially is true, it's kind of just one of many, many options. And I do think that that's an important qualification, I guess, to make on this apparent revival.